May I have a second?
Second, Grossman.
All in favor?
Aye.
Welcome to this evening's meeting. Notice of this regular meeting of the Pitman Board of Education was advertised in the South Jersey Times, posted at Borough Hall, and a copy thereof delivered to all Pitman schools to be posted, and posted on the district's website. Further notice was posted and filed as required by law, stating that the board would meet in closed session at 7 p.m. in the Pitman High School Media Center. The President shall entertain any objections with supporting reasons to the conduct of this meeting on the grounds that it violates the Open Public Meeting Act. Seeing none, please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. Please join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Rose, will you please call roll?
Ms. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Pappalardo?
Here.
Ms. Higby-Iono?
Here.
Mr. Grossman?
Present.
Ms. Farrell? Ms. Coate?
Here.
Ms. Bolton?
Here.
Mr. Crispin?
Here.
All present.
Sure.
Good. Well, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure tonight to be able to introduce to you one of our county commissioners, Mr. Jim Jefferson, for a very, very special presentation.
That's the warmest reception I ever got. Thanks. Very, very kind of you. Check, check. On, we're good?
You're good.
On behalf of Gloucester County and our 300,000 residents, we wanted to honor and recognize the South Jersey Group 1 boys basketball champions. We give a round of applause for the boys. So I'm a little bit of a sports fanatic. Love to follow high school and college sports and love to follow local athletes. And so I was at the game when you guys took down the KIPP Charter School, and man, what a flow of emotions. We were up high, and then it got nervous at the end, and I'm glad I didn't have a child on the team because my knees were knocking, and I didn't even have someone on the team. But what a great show of resilience, working together. I know you guys went up big, and what I love as an athlete and as a coach is just to see how you guys work together. What great teamwork, team effort, and I think it really exemplifies this community, just everybody coming together, working together. I mean, this is one of the most storied basketball programs in South Jersey, so it was great to see, great to watch, and on behalf of all the county commissioners, I'm just really proud of you. And I don't think we do enough of honoring and recognizing the work of young people, so we made it a point to come out to you and to your community, look you in the face and tell you how proud of you we are. So I have fellow Pitman resident, Commissioner Matt Wang, with me today. We're going to hand out a proclamation and certificates to honor and recognize you guys. And I know there's been a lot said about boys basketball this year and just some controversies. You know, what you guys had to face in the state semifinal, I mean, I just want to personally say that was wrong and how you guys had to end your season. But you guys faced it like men, worked together, gave them a run for their money, and when a lot of people didn't think it would be that close. Proud of you guys, how you faced that challenge and what you did as together as a team. Really, really proud of you, and just wanted to say congratulations on a great season. Anything you want to add, Commissioner Wang?
Jimmy said it all. We're very proud of you. You're the pride of Pitman, pride of Gloucester County. Honored to be here to be able to honor you. Thank you so much.
All right, so we're going to go in great order. The man who was raining threes on that Saturday afternoon, Mr. Steve Devaney. Me and Steve do not have the same haircut. Great job, man. Congratulations. Mr. Colin Ambrosius. Ooh. Colin, congratulations. Mike, I don't want to mispronounce your last name. Fizzicaro. There we go, Mike. Mike, congratulations. No problem. Jake Epting? Not here? Oh. Oh, he is? Oh. I'm just going to say Porter because I don't want to misspell it. Porter. There we go. Porter, I want to apologize. I have the most American name, Jim Jefferson, so I mean no harm to you. Congratulations. Sonny Myers. Sonny, congratulations. No problem. Sean Powell. Chris Wiley. Chris, congratulations. Elijah Crispin. Congratulations, bud. No problem, man. Greg Peterson. Greg, congratulations. No problem. Hudson Rue. Hudson, congratulations. No problem. Trey. I'm going to just say Trey. I'm sorry. How do you pronounce it? Tinges. Tinges? I'm sorry, man. Again, I have a very American name, man. Congratulations, bud. No problem. Dane Collum. Lucas Razzie. Congratulations, Lucas. No problem. Laney Guzman. Parker D. Christopher. Parker, congratulations, man. Head coach Ron Myers. Coach, congratulations. No problem. No problem. Assistant coach Steve Crispin. Congratulations. Fred Giorgetti, assistant coach. Congratulations, coach. And assistant coach Jim Usselton. Coach, congratulations. So this proclamation that we're going to present you with is going to be read into the meeting minutes at Gloucester County Board of Commissioners at our next meeting. And so you guys will literally go down in history in Gloucester County being recognized today for your championship, South Jersey Group 1 Champs 2024. Super proud of you guys. Coach, I'm going to present this to you on behalf of Gloucester County and its residents. Congratulations.
Very much. Appreciate it.
So somehow we're going to have to get a team picture.
Hey, nothing easy to figure it out, right?
And being Chris here with me.
Freshmen and sophomores take a knee.
I can take it. I just might not be able to get up. Am I blocking you, buddy?
Here, move down.
I will take a knee if I have to. We good?
You guys put the old guy on his knee?
I'm going to fall over. Got one right here, right here.
All right, also, gentlemen, the Board of Education would just like to also present you with a certificate in recognition of your championship. If you can do that, Colin. Dane's not here, right? Take Dane's. Elijah? You take that. Elijah? Thank you. Coach? Porter? Congratulations, guys. Greg? Sonny? Extremely strong. Right here. Lucas?
Yeah.
That's it. Chris is up there.
Yeah, like 2000.
Greg? You're a little Let's got their pictures. Again, guys, congratulations. We're taking about a 5-minute recess. Good job, guys. Good job. 5 minutes, right? Okay.
Cleared out. So that's going to bring us to our referendum update, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Bolton.
That was quick.
Okay. So, I'll just give you guys a quick update on our referendum. We are supposed to be going out for bond. We are set up to have our vote in December at that election. So we have been working through, I don't know how many of you know, we have recently did our strategic planning in the district. So with that, we had a facilities committee. They walked a lot of our grounds to see what we needed updates on, and it was a really hard decision for us because we know how much things cost these days, and we were kind of shocked at some of the prices, but we really wanted to do our due diligence to kind of come up with a plan of what was really needed, just so that taxpayers, you know, we're all taxpayers too. So whatever we're putting on you, we want to make sure we're comfortable putting on ourselves as well. So we really have hammered this out. We have had multiple conversations with our financial advisors was the latest. We came up with calculators, did all sorts of things with formulas to make sure that we were plugging in numbers. If we borrow this much, how much is it going to cost the average taxpayer? We talked to the architects to see what was really needed and necessary. So we think we have come up with a resolution that we are going to finally, in executive session. Do we have it all on?
The resolution is on there. It is number 14
Okay.
under finance and facilities.
Yep. All right. I see it. So all of that, but that does not have our list,
No, it
right?
does not. That's just,
Okay.
that's the approval to go out for bond and for our
To move.
architects to be able to go ahead and bring these projects to the state and for us to be able to go onto the December 2024 ballot.
Okay. So should I read out the? Do we need to do
It's up to you whether you want to inform the
Is that
public of
this?
that.
I think we should.
I would say our biggest contributor to the bond this year is probably going to be our heating system. Our HVAC at PES is very dated at this point. And those are funds that we're not going to be able to come up with if we don't go out for bond. It's not something that we can go into our reserves for, different projects that, there are some projects that we kind of wanted to do with the bond, but we said, we'll save them because we really felt like we needed to do some really important things over there. So I would say our HVAC is probably going to be the biggest chunk out for bond this time. And then we do have a few drainage issues that we're going to fix, and maybe and roof as well here at the high school. So that should eat up most of our money.
I think the board really did work diligently, and, we kind of took it right up to the wire with Mrs. Bolton going back and forth with calls, and Mrs. Rose and Mr. Crispin making sure that they were checking everything twice, and we had all the information, so we were making a really informed decision. It was definitely a matter of balancing the needs. The wants really couldn't possibly even make it onto the list because we want to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, but we also recognize that when your youngest facility is 50+ years old, you have to put some repairs in from time to time. So that was, I think, everyone kind of put the work in and really wrestled with the overall financial impact. So,
Yeah.
Thank you. That's going to bring us to our first public comment. The Pitman Public School Board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters of community interest. This is the first of 2 public comments we will have tonight. The first public hearing is on agenda items only. This is a public comment and not a dialogue between the board and the public. You will have 3 minutes to speak. It's your opportunity to comment or ask questions. In accordance with board policy number 0167, we ask that you state your name, municipality of residence, and group affiliation if applicable. To be recognized to speak, please stand to the podium located on my right and speak clearly into the microphone. Seeing no one, that will bring us to correspondence. Mrs. Rose, any correspondence?
We do not have any.
Thank you. I will now move to accept a motion for the minutes of the Pitman Board of Education as held on the dates listed below are approved as printed and reading dispensed with. May I have a second?
Second, Papalardo.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any objections? Okay. All right, that's going to take us to our president's report, where it's that time of year where I do a really terrible quality Google slideshow on our funding formula. So, I apologize in advance. Can I move this microphone below? All right. I'm confident that it's user error on my part, but I don't know how to get this guy to. It's not on. Oh, geez. It should even be an easy fix, too. Where am I looking? Oh, okay, thanks. They realized that was too much. I wasn't going to be able to figure it out. Smart assessment. I know patience. We have the world's best tech team, if you guys aren't aware. This is 100% user error on my part. They're amazing. Okay. So I just wanted to go ahead and give a brief background about some of the legislative advocacy efforts of the Board of Education and to review the SFRA funding formula and what the challenges are, both for members of the public and the Board of Education. I know this is something I kind of speak a lot about, but I really do think it's one of the most critical areas that we need to be pursuing legislative advocacy efforts. So let's talk about, this is the equation. So adequacy budget, which is how much it should cost to provide a thorough and efficient education. The state then subtracts your local fair share, which is what the state formula estimates local taxpayers should be able to afford in school taxes. And it equals equalization aid. And that's what the state contributes to the district's cost of providing a thorough and fair education. So this is really the crux of one of the largest parts of the SFRA. They look at, you know, the enrollment of your students. They say this is how much your local fair share of taxes are. This is how much equalization aid you'll get. So there's buckets. When they look at when they're figuring out what your budget should be, they put kids into buckets. They have full day kindergarten through 5th grade. They have middle school 6th through 8th, and they have high school. Each of those buckets have a different weight. That's the number in white on the front. So the number of 6th through 8th graders are multiplied by 1.04, and the number of 9th to 12th graders are multiplied by 1.15. And these numbers are supposed to give you what is called a weighted enrollment, because the state assumes that to provide a thorough and efficient education to a high schooler, there's additional costs comparative to what it would cost to educate, say, a 1st grader. So that's where those weighted calculations come from. So what the state does when they're getting their adequacy budget is they don't say, okay, these are the number of kids you have, and this is how many kids you have in each of those grade levels, and so this is the amount of money you should be spending. It's not so fast from the state's perspective. They use what's called a growth rate calculation. So a growth rate calculation uses a 6-year look-back period in an effort to determine what the enrollment trends were in your district. In our case, while we are seeing rebounding enrollment, our numbers are starting to creep back up, we're still being penalized by our past loss of students. So suburban districts had some of the largest loss in enrollment during COVID, but those are the numbers that are represented in our 6-year look-back period. So we're being penalized with 3.49% of our students being taken right off the top from the number of students that are enrolled in our district. So you can see down here, this right up here is our actual prior year resident enrollment, and it's a pretty complicated formula. So they use 3 years, and they divide the sum of those 3 years by the next 3 years, and then they take the square root, the third root of those. My math didn't go that high. So, and then they subtract it, and they create this growth rate calculation. So off the top, we're missing about 50 students from our adequacy budget that aren't accounted for when the state says this is how much it should cost you to provide a thorough and efficient education. So our weighted enrollment from the state's perspective is 1,070 students. Pre-K is not counted in this, by the way. When in reality, our weighted base enrollment should be 1,120. So off the top, we're losing those numbers. The price tag for that loss, $676,590. That's then calculated against the per pupil rate. Then there's what's called a geographic cost factor that is discounted a little bit because we're in South Jersey, so they assume it costs less to educate students down here. And then it's multiplied by 2/3. So that's how you arrive at that 676. So that's money that the state is not allocating to us in our adequacy budget that they're saying that we should be permitted to spend when they're trying to figure out the math on how much state aid is owed to us. The second part of this are student characteristics. So I'll be honest, I'm going to briefly highlight these items because we are such a small district that we could get into some student identifying information, and I want to make sure that we're steering clear of that because it's segmented by where those students are at within our buildings. So these are also not accurate, though. Like, for example, at risk are children who are on free and reduced lunch. Limited English proficiency are students with limited English proficiency, and then you receive an additional weight when students fall into both of those categories. I'm just going to say that this is not an accurate reflection of what our student population enrollment actually is. Because, like I said, kind of getting into the weeds on this could be student identifying, and I feel like that would be really inappropriate. Oh, wrong computer. So this is our adequacy budget calculation. So the second factor in this adequacy budget calculation, and these are copied right off of our state aid numbers, is the census versus actual population. So if you can see in the second category, there's special education. The state does not provide us with special education funds in our adequacy budget that's reflective of the actual population of our students. They say that we have 161 students in our special education population, where in reality we have 244 classified students. So we do not receive that per pupil funding in our adequacy budget. So remember, that's that top number that they start with, that they say you should be spending to provide a thorough and efficient education. So off the top, and this is another one, it's $21,868 per pupil, multiplied by the growth, or by the geographic cost analysis, and then times 2.3. So the loss of census versus actual population on just that special education component is $1.1 million of money that is not allocated to our adequacy budget that the state is using to calculate what our equalization aid is. The next thing you get to is that local fair share. That was the second part of that equation. First item of this is equalization valuation. This is something we've talked a lot about over the last 2 years. Pittman from fiscal year 22 to 25 has seen a 40.5% increase in their equalization valuation. That's the real value of the taxable properties in our community. Our SR3A form has 3,206 mostly residential properties, and they have determined that the rate of value on those have gone up by over 40.5%. They add that to the district income. Of course, it's a more complicated formula, but this is kind of the basis of it. And it creates what your local fair share of tax burden should be. The challenge with using something like an equalization valuation to determine a district's wealth is that it doesn't correlate to their median income, and it doesn't correlate, it's a false equivalency, for lack of a better word, because your people's salaries did not rise comparably. I don't know many people in Pittman since 2022 who have seen a 40.5% increase in their salaries. So they don't use district income and equalization valuation comparably to look for overall wealth increases. So if you ranked municipalities in the state of New Jersey by median household income, Pittman would be in the bottom 35th percentile. I would say that that is not representative of a community that can afford to self-fund their school district. But when the state uses an equalization valuation, it allows them to almost arbitrarily apply that formula to our wealth and determine that we should see a large increase. So this is the actual calculation. The state has a multiplier. They divide it by 2. They add it together. So as you can see, they raised our local fair share to $14,850,288. We've seen a 29% increase in this number since fiscal year 2022. So again, we look at that formula, we see an adequacy budget where we're not receiving credit for students that we have actually enrolled, where they then subtract a local fair share that I believe they've arbitrarily inflated, which then equals a decrease in equalization aid, meaning that if just looking at these two factors, we're missing nearly $3 million in equalization aid from this year's calculation. We've lost 50% of equalization aid in the same time period that I've referenced earlier, that the state has continued to decrease the amount of aid that they've provided us. Here's a chart. We're trying to look at one of the pending pieces of legislation, which is Assembly Bill 942, which would take a 5-year calculation for equalization valuation to slow those large growth calculations. But if you can see in fiscal year 23 to 24 to 25, the amount that those 3,200 properties went up in value in Pittman is astronomical. District income as well went up 31%, and we saw that local fair share. Now this is stretched over an additional year from what we previously discussed, up by 25%, and a decrease in 49% of our equalization aid. Meanwhile, our adequacy budget, how much they think we should be spending, went up less than a percentage point. This is what's driving our state aid down, and we are not alone. So when we look at the number of districts that are self-funded, which is the terminology that's often used to talk about districts that receive $0 in equalization valuation, they've drastically increased in the last 2 years. To give you an example of a local community that is self-funded is Haddonfield. So when we're talking about Pittman being a self-funded district, I don't necessarily believe that, as much as we would all like to believe that we've made these huge leaps and bounds, and we certainly have as a community. We've seen a tremendous amount of regrowth in our community. I don't know that we've achieved that level of property value or income wealth. So these are some of the items that we're advocating for from a legislative advocacy standpoint. The Assembly bill that I just mentioned that requires a 5-year average for the equalization valuation would return about $1 million to Pittman. We're talking about dual enrollment counts. They would require districts to provide enrollment data from both October and February so that we're receiving the most accurate numbers represented on our funding formula. That's another particular item. There's an additional item that's evaluating legislative action that would be evaluating the adequacy budget and whether or not it is sufficient for the students that we actually have on roll. So I know this is a lot of numbers, and I'm happy to share this information with any members of the public that would like it, and the board hears it a whole lot. But I do feel like this is really what is driving our state aid, and that we've allowed the narrative to become some of these things like S2 and other factors. And in reality, it's really a weight that's being put on the other side of the scale that's decreasing the state aid. It is artificially being inflated by some of the mechanisms within the state funding formula. And it's why districts this year that were hit weren't the same districts that were historically hit. So there's some new communities that were really taken aback to be on the losing end of the funding formula because they weren't S2 districts, or they weren't districts that faced some of the same challenges as a Pitman. And they're shocked, and they're really heated because I see them at the same hearings I'm at. So the hope is that we'll see some level of relief this year, but the bigger long-term goal will be to provide more insight and analysis into the funding formula so that we see legislative efforts to amend that in a way that is productive for all the districts in the community. So just to share a couple quick updates, both with boards and members of the public. On March 11th, I was able to attend the New Jersey Assembly Education Committee in Trenton. We discussed the funding formula. We talked a lot about that 5-year equalization valuation number and what that would mean and what the challenges were for districts that saw sometimes even larger increases or decreases. On March 14th, Pitman was invited to be one of the 10 districts that had an opportunity to provide testimony at Senator Gopal's Education Committee hearing, and it was just regarding the funding formula. They really asked us to shy away from harping on any of our previous fiscal challenges or the numbers that we've received in the past. They asked us to focus on being really solution-oriented and providing the legislature with ideas that we had to correct the funding formula, and we kind of have hit upon all of the ones that we had. And then on March 19th, yesterday, I was able to provide testimony to the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee about some of the challenges that we have. The only other item that I'd like to add from a legislative advocacy standpoint, just for full transparency, because we do communicate regularly as a board to make sure everyone's on the same page, but for members of the public as well, is the extraordinary aid is another component. So when we look at next year, about 12% of our operating budget would be allocated for special education out of district placement, which is about less than 3% of our population. And some of the rising costs associated with that could be pupil transportation contracts that are $100,000 plus that we're not eligible for extraordinary aid for transportation costs. Tuition costs, aid costs, these things have grown exorbitantly, like everything else in our current economy. And when we look at the extraordinary aid that we receive back in that one bucket, it works out to be about 10 cents on the dollar comparative to what we actually put out. So when we talk about self-funding a district, we have to be mindful of the reality that those are some of the cost factors that are growing disproportionate to when the SFRA calculated what it took to run a thorough and efficient education school district, or to provide a thorough and efficient education. And it would be incredibly difficult for most communities to raise enough in local property taxes to accommodate those types of cost factors. So that extraordinary aid, the governor has announced in his fiscal year 25 that it would be flat funded, which would actually be a decrease because we know that the costs have risen. So this year we were given 71 cents on the dollar for the eligible costs, and that will go down because if it's flat funded and those costs have gone up, each district will be entitled to less of those funds, but while spending more. So that's just an additional item of legislative advocacy that the board has continued to kind of bring to the legislature's attention. Like I said, I always welcome any questions from members of the public. I know that the board, like I said, hears this a whole lot, and they get really longly worded emails because I'm very passionate about the fact that this is the real challenge, and suburban districts are just being driven to the ends of their ability to compensate for this type of loss. And our district tries really hard to make it all work. I mean, for members of the public, Mr. Crispin and Mrs. Rose have entertained quite a lot of questions with nuanced, even our PEA, lots of questions at the 11th hour. If you could please provide me with this extremely nuanced statistic so that I can speak to whatever point I'm trying to kind of make and draw, members of the legislature's attention to, and they have all participated and helped, and the entire board is very supportive. So I really appreciate everyone's efforts on this. But I just had to share that as part of our update for this month. And then I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Papalardo for the CSA review.
And before I go into the CSA information, I know that as a board, we all really appreciate everything that Mrs. Miller does and continues to do. It's no secret, we don't get paid and we don't get raises, so nothing of nothing is nothing. And she really goes out of her way to dig and find answers and information and things that don't make sense, and then really tries to educate us and then the community as well on this is what's going on, this is why we're in, the predicament that we're in, and what can we do to maybe try and advocate for ourselves. I think she's the best advocate of a board that I've ever seen as far as fighting for her district, and really, no stone is left unturned. She's going to find everyone and turn it over to try and make something happen so that as a district we can continue and really hold on to all of our important traditions and the things that we have, because we know that's why we're here, why the community's here, why we send our kids here. So I just wanted to give her a quick props and say thank you for all that you do, and thank you for breaking it down for us, because it's not something I would ever be able to break down. She's great with numbers, I am not. So she's also able to kind of show us, okay, in a nutshell, this is what's going on. This is where the money is, this is where it's not, and this is why we're feeling all the things that we're feeling, especially with this budget process this year. So, with that being said, every year we have to do an evaluation of our CSA. CSA is a fancy word for superintendent, or fancy letters for superintendent. And because Mr. Crispin will be leaving us at the end of this school year, we will still be doing an evaluation, but there is a long form and a short form. We will be doing the short form, which is a little bit more informal. Gives us a chance to actually kind of, instead of check off the boxes and write, it actually lets us use our voices and kind of write down where we think the district is and what he has done, and kind of give him an idea as we send him off of all the things that he's really done, that we appreciate. So the NJSBA, it gives us a tool to do it. It's on their website, and the portal for it is already open. I did reach out to Mr. Crispin over the weekend and told him that we would like to try and get it done sooner rather than later. So he will go on, he will complete his part, and then once his part is done, we will complete our part, and then we will meet with him to go over it and work. Our goal is, I think, by the end of April to have everything kind of signed off and done. So that's where we are.
All right, you're up.
Oh, geez.
Thank you.
All right. Glenn, stay here. Okay, move this just a little. And I need a microphone, right?
Right underneath. I
Wireless.
apologize.
All right, good evening, everyone. Tonight, the Board of Education, as you can see on our agenda, will be approving a tentative budget to submit to the county superintendent for their review and approval. This will be the 24-25 budget. And I guess in essence what I will be doing tonight will be providing a very brief overview. The more detailed presentation is done at the public hearing, which will be in April. So tonight I'm just going to kind of, again, briefly go through kind of where we are at this particular time. And I think more or less I'm taking the information that April has already presented to you relative to all the funding challenges that we're facing to kind of share with you the impact that that's now having in terms of the programs and services that we're able to offer the students here in the Pitman School District. To start the presentation, I am going to begin with a document that I've been using since I've been here, just to kind of give you an illustration of the challenges we face relative to our enrollment, relative to our state aid. And the Board of Education, your copies are as an attachment on the agenda there. I'm going to ask Rebecca if you wouldn't mind handing that out to members of our community. All right. And the information that you're receiving is kind of like a 10-year snapshot of our enrollment, because as you kind of heard a little bit about in what April was presenting, our enrollment is somewhat tied in a very indirect way to our funding. And then also a kind of a roughly about a 10-year snapshot of our state aid totals over that period of time. As far as the budget is concerned, we're going to be taking a look at some of the details of the budget, but generally speaking, what we're able to provide in the way of services to the students here in Pitman is totally, largely, however you want to look at it, driven by the amount of state aid that we receive. There's only two revenue resources that we really have available to us. One of those is state aid, a large one, and the other is our tax levy. So just very simply, you can see there, certainly enrollment has been a challenge over that 10-year period. As you can see how it has decreased over that period of time. April mentioned kind of a little bit of an upswing there, as you can see, is over the course of the last couple years. At the bottom is the more important piece, because this really kind of gives you an illustration of the impact that the reductions in state aid have had over this period of time. So you can see a summary there, and I'm going to come back to this in a second. I just want to comment on S2. So if this was not bad enough, and when I say this up here is just the basic funding formula for for school districts. 2008, I think it was officially approved. It's the kind of the baseline that determines our main source of state aid, which is equalization aid. And I think April's done a really, really nice job of kind of indicating, and I think there's a general consensus that there's some flaws in the system that need to be looked at and that are currently being looked at that have significantly impacted districts like Pitman. So you have that as a baseline. That's the basic formula. Then on top of this, we now have S2. S2 is a Senate action that was taken to adjust aid to school districts. So we go back to just a real history lesson, back to 2008. There was a new funding formula. The powers that be did not like how the funding formula was figuring out numbers for certain places in the states. And so they basically said, we're going to hold harmless districts. We're not going to take money away from districts. And we're going to make that adjustment through the form of an adjustment aid. And it's on here. You can see it very clearly at the bottom. There's a thing called adjustment aid. So we were one of those districts that they elected not to adjust according to the formula, which was already flawed. So they decided not to adjust our aid, and they give us this adjustment aid to hold us harmless, to kind of keep things kind of equal. And then about 6 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, when the legislation was passed, they basically said, no, this is wrong. And what we need to do now is we need to adjust this to give the money back to the districts that should have been getting it, that didn't get it, did not receive it during all those years, and take it away from the districts that received it but weren't entitled to receive it, which was the Pitmans. And you can see during this period of time, as April has indicated, equalization aid is our largest aid, the largest amount of aid that we receive. It's what's based on this formula that she talked about. And you can see how much that's decreased over this period of time. I start with about 2016-17 as about one of the highest amounts that we received. And you go to the projections for next year, and that's got to be close to $3.5 or $3.6 million just in adjustment aid. $3.6 million is a lot. Provides a lot of services to our students. In addition to that, if you look down to the adjustment aid was also phased out during that period of time, which was another, $1.6 million during some periods of time in there. So you put those two things together and you get down to the end and you look at that total of the 4.7 compared to the 9.8, it's over $5 million that we've lost in state aid. Again, one of the major sources of revenue for the district. So S2, again, was a 6-period adjustment that we've gone through. Next year is the last year of this adjustment. And that kind of plays in as a very important factor in our conversation tonight because we're going through the challenges of reductions in state aid. We're hopeful that there's going to be changes in the formula, that those changes are going to result in hopefully some adjustments on the more positive side maybe for us with state aid. So our goal, I think, from an administrative perspective, Mrs. Rose and myself and Rebecca, as we work through this process, we got to get through one more year. That's what we have to do. And I've shared with the staff I don't think this is not a budget that enables us to take steps forward. This budget that we're proposing is more a budget of survival. And I say that in all seriousness. This is survival. When we went into the process and we got the numbers and we put the numbers into our budget, and when I say put it into our budget, we start a budget with kind of a wish list, kind of things we'd like to be able to do. We'd like to think positive that hopefully, people are going to see that this is not right and they're going to do something to fix it, or they'll at least give us level funding. Can't imagine they're going to take another $700,000 away. It seemed like maybe last year they saw how bad the formula was, how flawed the formula was, and they gave the S2 districts back 2/3 of what they were taking away from us. So, they see it now. They get it. Well, they didn't, because the formula still continued in the same way it did, and we knew it was going to be about this amount based on the calculations that we had available to us, and this is where we are. When we went into the process of starting to have to balance the budget, we were about $1.8 million over where we needed to be. There was an imbalance. Our expenditures on one side was $1.8 million more than the revenue over here. And that's because on this side, the revenue side, there's only two main sources. There's state aid, which was going down by $700,000+, and there's tax, the tax levy. And the tax levy can only go up by 2%. That's our cap every year. And we're going to talk a little bit more of that in a few minutes. Over here, we have costs that are rising much more significantly than that one little 2%. Remember, that's not even 2% because we lost $700,000. Our costs for salaries are going up way much more than that. Health benefits, special education, other costs, and that's where we get this imbalance. Last year we had an option. It was not certainly an option any of us really wanted to move forward through, but it was what we had to do to, again, survive. And it enabled us to, I think, stay strong as a district, but unfortunately having to close 2 schools, and enabled us to be able to get through last year and maintain, I think, a strong staff for at least another year. This year was much more difficult because we did not have those options. And the impact it's going to have throughout the district could be significant. And I say could be because we're still working through this process. We've only had a couple weeks since we got our state aid numbers. It's a very difficult chore. We think we have a sense of kind of where this is going to be, and I will share that information with you. But we will be still working on the budget until we have to present the final budget for final approval at the public hearing. So with that, I'm going to hand out a second document here. Again, if you don't mind. Okay. The board has a copy of this at your tables here. This is also a document that we have been using in some of our conversations, and this is just going to provide me a means by which I can give you a very brief, simplistic overview of kind of the challenges that we are facing and highlight some of the areas where we will, in all likelihood, see some budgetary reductions. So the first thing I just want to mention, I've numbered these. On the front page in the lower right-hand corner, there's a number 22,801,644. That's actually a number 1 that's next to it. All I want to illustrate here is that what we have to do is we have to ensure that our budget is in balance, the budget that we're presenting to the county office, and that means that our expenditures equal our revenues. So this is the revenue side, the front, the revenue side. If you just flip it over to the back, you will see a number 1 in the upper right-hand corner, and you'll see the same number, 22,801,644. That is our total operating budget. It's called the general fund on that side. On the other side, it is called the total operating budget. It's kind of the same thing. That is the basic budget that we have put together that will enable us to operate the district, given the reductions that we've had in the state aid formulas. So that's the first piece. Just to highlight a couple things there on the revenue side. Number 2 is that equalization aid number that I've already showed you on the other document. This is on the front page right now. This is number 2. You can see it was 5.7 million 2 years ago, 4.2 last year, and it goes down to 3.5, roughly the difference of $700 and some thousand. Major source of our funding. I want to also point out, just to add to the challenges that we face, if you go, go up to number 3, which is at the top, that's our tax levy. You can see our tax levy is the major source. Whether we like it or not, this is a community that certainly has valued education. and we recognize how important it is to this community, but it is the major source of our revenue, and you can see how that is increased over the 3 years. I want to point out, and also for the board, the increase that we're permitted is 2% every year. Last year, through the calculations that we run and that are provided to us by the state, we were allowed to exceed that 2% last year by a very small amount. Say it was roughly maybe about a percentage, roughly about a percent. So last year kind of helped us a little bit. And we were able to exceed that because of the projected health benefit costs. Our health benefits were going up like 9 or 10%. It's in the state calculation. Health benefits is one of the means by which you can exceed the 2% cap. Because we were in such dire straits last year, the board felt that it was necessary to exceed that 2% cap, so they did. Now again, that was an estimate that was built into the system. As it turned out, through some certain savings that we were able to realize on the health benefits side, we did not realize that savings. So in essence, that 1% that was added to the cap last year has been reduced from the cap this year. So that number that you're seeing there from 2023, 24 to 24, 25 is not a 2% cap. It's really closer to a 1%. Is that right? About a 1% cap. So we can't argue that. That's fair. I mean, we want to stay close, and we don't want to have too much of an impact on the tax levy, but obviously it's one more layer to the challenge that we're facing this year as far as having a reduced amount of revenues to work with. The fourth one, if you look down a little bit further, about 3/4 down the page, that's our withdrawal from capital reserve. I only want to highlight that one because somebody might want to say, well, what's that $1.187 million number there from last year, and why is it only $30,000? It's a big difference. The number from last year is, for some of you may recall, we received a ROD grant from the state. The state will be paying to have an upgraded HVAC system here at the high school. We have to put the money up front first, and then the state will come in and will refund us that amount, up to 60%. I think we have to pay 40% of that. So that's what's represented there. That's because of the ROD grant. That money will go back into our capital reserve account when this is all said and done. Board can utilize that for maybe projects that we're not going to be able to do through the referendum because of our limitations on the money. So I just want to point that out. Then I want to point out maybe the most important number, which is number 5. And sometimes this is something that gets overlooked. Anytime I've worked with the Board of Education when it comes to budget, I tell them it's probably the most important number for them to ensure they're managing appropriately, and this is budgeted fund balance. This is basically our savings account. And here you can see that generally school districts, most school districts use elements of their savings account to help fund the next year's budget. And we've done that in the past, and we're projecting to do that. Of the $1.2 million that you see there, about $900,000 of that we are required to utilize for the budget. And won't get into that. We could get more on that into the public hearing. We'll explain that. But there is a part of the calculation, excess surplus, so we're required. So that's not even something there's a decision on. The difference there between, let's say, the $900,000 and maybe the 1.2 is a decision we're making right now as a district, as an administration, in our recommendation to the board, to use additionally just to get the budget balanced. All right, if that makes sense. So in addition to the 9 that we have to put in, and it's a little over 9, we were putting in, say, an additional close to maybe $300,000, maybe $250,000 in additional surplus to be able to balance the budget, to support the revenue side, so we don't have to cut another $250,000 from the budget. The caution here is, like, if you were utilizing your savings to pay your bills, savings runs out, and if you don't have the savings to continue to do that, what do you have to end up doing? You have to reduce what your the amount of money you have to pay your bills. And for us, it would be reducing the budget. So it's a caution that we put out there. Carissa, so I'm sorry, it won't be Carissa, but we will be working administratively to continue to look at ways in which we can maybe reduce that amount. So this is definitely, as I'm saying, talking really more to the board right now, this is something we need to look at very, very carefully So even though we're going to talk in a second about some of the budgetary reductions, we may not be where we need to be in order to have a budget that enables us to move forward in a positive direction. Because we're working hard this year to fix the problems of the past. We don't want to use Band-Aids. I would say this is a Band-Aid. And we want to eliminate Band-Aids. Because if you don't eliminate Band-Aids, they're going to have to be dealt with in the next year. So that's just something, again, to the Board of Education, we're going to continue to look at if there's means by which we feel comfortable. If things happen, retirements and breakage and savings and things of that nature, you know, you and we will have decisions to make, and whether or not we utilize those funds to potentially fund other positions that are being cut from the budget, or do we look to reduce that number and try to get rid of that Band-Aid. So again, working forward after next year, we're starting on kind of, I think, a ground zero for the first time probably in a long time, knowing that S2 is behind us after next year to then be able to start to build for the future. So that's going to take us over to the expenditure side, and I've highlighted a few things there as appropriations. I guess I numbered them. Continue with our number, just going to start down the top. And I'm going to give you some generalizations, but you can just see those numbers where there has been some significant reductions. We're going to talk about those in a second. You can review them on your own. You can see some areas where there's been some significant increases. We talk about some of our areas where we're challenged. I would say generally in most of these are not areas where we have choices. These are things that we're mandated to be able to provide. So with that, let me just kind of give the board and the community a sense of the impact. I talked about the fact that we had $1.8 million that we had to reduce. I had the opportunity yesterday to meet with the teachers at Memorial and at Pitman Elementary School. And one of the things I shared right off the bat, which is probably a major area where we're looking at potential reductions, and I say this to the board, it is going to be very, very difficult for us to be able to maintain 4 classes at Pitman Elementary School in all grades. We have 4 right now. We have 4 seconds, 4 thirds, 4 fourths, 4 fifths, and 4 sixths. It's 5 grades at Pitman Elementary School. It is going to be very difficult to maintain 4 classes of those 5 grades. We're in the process of looking about what that might look like. I would say ballpark maybe 3 of those 5. 6th grade, we have a departmentalized program in 6th grade. Therefore, it kind of requires 4 teachers because they're teaching 4 different subject areas. Certainly, it's something that could be evaluated. We could go to a more self-contained type structure, 1 teacher or similar structure to what we have in the other grades where one's teaching ELA, the others are teaching math, social studies, and science, 1 teacher teaching all subjects. Those things are options, but I think it was very important for this community when we made the transition last year at Pitman Elementary School, when we maintained the 6th grade there, that they had an experience similar to the experience that we were having when it was a middle school, and that they have that opportunity before they transition to the junior high school. So right now, that's still there. We have 4 teachers in the 6th grade, content specialists that will be providing those levels of instruction. 5th grade is a large grade. That's why we're probably on a fence and saying we're going to need 4 grades probably in 5th grade next year. 4th, 3rd, and 2nd, right now, there's a strong likelihood there will not be. We were talking earlier, class sizes probably in the higher 20s. We're probably in that low to mid 20s in some areas, but it's certainly not going to be where we would like it to be. But that's the reality that we're dealing with. Certainly the potential of some impacts in terms of support services, especially at the elementary school relative to special education. Right now we have a very strong, supportive special education program at the elementary school. We have a co-teaching model that we're very proud of, that we feel has done great things, but it is a challenging model to be able to support financially. It's a model in which we, for the most part, in most grades, in most in-class support classrooms, have a full-time special education teacher with a full-time classroom teacher. It's great to have, but we will have a very difficult time maintaining that structure. We'll still be meeting an IEP in terms of what the IEP requires, but to have that teacher in there for all subjects for the most part for the entire day is going to be very much a challenge. Basic skills will be very much a challenge to maintain the basic skills program that we currently have at the elementary level, and that kind of spills over a little bit to Memorial because Memorial also has a basic skills program. we're going to be challenged to maintain that program to the level that it is being provided now. A lot of what I have said has had an impact. There will be an impact at the junior, senior high level. So there will be probably minimally the 2 to 3 teachers that will be impacted as far as that's concerned. You have to keep in mind the high school, junior, senior high school, those grades took the major brunt last year, because in bringing the 7th and 8th grade over, we were able to start sharing teachers. And by the sharing of teachers, we probably cut at least 1 teacher from every subject area right across the board at the high school level. So they took the major brunt of the teaching staff. We lost 2 administrators. We're both really primarily middle school, high school, were the 2 administrators we lost. We have no vice principals, as you know, here at the high school. So they really took the brunt. Elementary, for the most part, I mean, we lost the guidance counselor, you lose the nurse, we lost some certainly positions we'd like to have been able to maintain there, but we still maintained 4 classes, which is what we had before at each grade level. We maintained the co-teaching model. We maintained the basic skills program. Everything, for the most part, remained intact. Unfortunately, we're not going to be in a position where we're going to be able to continue that. Every other area, they will not be the only areas. I don't think there will be an area, as I shared yesterday, that won't be touched. From all support areas, from the facility staff in all areas of custodial, of maintenance, of grounds, supports. We're still working through, again, what that will look like, but we cannot imagine that there won't be every area impacted in order for us to be able to get to the number that we need to get to tonight in order to be able to approve a budget that is in balance. I said the other day, we will certainly, starting probably next week, be looking at the impact on staffing. Share will be looking at certifications, how we can move staff around to be able to maintain as many people as we possibly can. You know, it's usually this time of year we start getting retirements. We can start to see how those pieces start to fit in. Retirements sometimes will enable us to be able to have a savings, and how we may be able to utilize that savings, either, again, to fix this problem over here, or to be able to bring back some of the services that we might be losing. I think the last thing that I want to mention as far as the budget is concerned, as April indicated, there's a lot of conversations about state funding, the formula. If you recall, last year we were fortunate enough to be able to get the one-time funding, the adjustment for the S2 districts. I say to the board, I say to this community, if we're fortunate enough to be able to get funding, additional funding, we have to be very, very careful how that funding is used. We have to be very careful that we don't again, it's a Band-Aid. And if we want to use the funding to bring something back, we have to remember we're only bringing it back for 1 year. If the board decided that we got some funding and we want to make sure that we can lower those class sizes at the elementary level, which I think we would all agree would be incredibly nice and important to do, it's only for 1 year. Because once that one-time funding goes away, those positions have to go away. It's kind of where we are this year, and one of the challenges we're facing this year, to be able to present a balanced budget given the funding that we received last year. All right. And I think the last thing that I've said to staff, please keep in mind that you will see things getting done and you're going to question them. I mentioned the ROD grant. There's going to be questions. We're going to come in here and we're going to do work in the gymnasium, and they're going to put in this beautiful HVAC system, and people are going to ask the question, wait a minute, how can we put in an HVAC system when we're losing staff? This comes out of a different revenue source funded by the state. It's outside the operating budget. We will be purchasing computers next year for all of our students in 1st, 5th, and 9th grades. Those computers are not in the budget. They are utilized. We're going to be utilizing a one-time resource. We have some federal monies that we have not yet spent through ARP ESSER that we're going to be able to utilize. Unfortunately, though, they're not in the budget any longer. So what happens after next year is it to be determined. That's not kind of where we wanted to go, but where we needed to go in order to be able to balance the budget. We have a math curriculum that's being considered right now. Math curriculums are not inexpensive. They're very expensive. Again, it's something else that we're looking to utilize a one-time revenue source. So as I said to all the staff, you'll still see things happening over here. Please understand, they're coming out of one-time sources. They are not in the regular budget. We need to develop, approve, and move forward with a budget that we know is something that we can build on in the future that's going to support our operating expenses. So tonight you have the tentative budget that's being presented. It'll be on our agenda. The board will be taking action. I don't know if we want to entertain any questions now. Probably be a good time while we're here. Any specific questions anybody has? Yes.
So I have 3 questions actually. My first question is, when you say that we're looking at survival, I always like to know what the options are. Last year I really asked you a lot about the send and receive model, and that was, you said too expensive, more expensive than what we're doing. So I'm wondering, like, what are the other options? Is regionalization another option? Is that somehow cheaper? Or like, what would happen if we don't survive? First question.
Well, I think we have to define what survival is. When we went into this process, and when we were at 1.8, and I say we, Chris and I, Rebecca, I didn't know if we'd survive. I didn't. I really, truly didn't know. I mean, there were points where we're looking at each other and say, where do we go from here? It was at that point. And again, it was early in the process. This is a process of really digging deep and conversations. I was where probably was at that point. Are we at the point where we no longer can be the Pitman School District K-12 that we currently have? I think at the end of the day, none of us like this. None of us like where we're going to be. But I still think we're in a relatively good place. I think we can still be strong. I think the fact that it is the last year of S2 and that they hopefully, we know they're not going to be taking any more of the aid away through the adjustments. Anything else that happens from here on in is going to be the formula. And hopefully they're going to address the formula. We don't know what that means for us, but I can't imagine it means the significant decreases that we've had. So I think we survived. And I believe that what we're recommending to the Board of Education tonight is a sound budget. It's not where we want to be, but I think it's still, we're strong. I mean, we still maintain the people that we have, and I think that'll give us a baseline in order for us to be able to grow from. I don't believe, and I don't think this board, none of us are ready to even have a conversation, about what that could look like as far as from a 9 through 12 perspective.
Budget, and I don't know if there's going to be another, like, more itemized budget coming out, but I am curious, like, most things are decreasing, but it looks like school-sponsored extracurricular activities are increasing a little bit, and school-sponsored athletics instruction are increasing a fair amount. Can you talk at all about why those are increasing?
I can't. I don't know the details. This is just like a snapshots. Yes, there is the more detailed presentation, which is at the public hearing in April. A lot more details. Tonight is tentative, still a lot of movement. We will see probably a lot of numbers move around in order to do what we have to do, but yeah, we can have that conversation.
My third question is about curriculum and specifically ed tech. So ed tech is $1 billion industry at this point. And it is, many of the programs that are being utilized are not researched well enough to know their effectiveness. And I'm just asking, like, what, given our budget constraints, what is the vetting process of new curriculum, particularly technologies and apps and curriculums that are online? What does that vetting process look like, and are we really careful about what we're choosing to buy to see that there's evidence base to using it?
I'm not the person to answer that. So yeah, that's a great question. If you can give us some time, let us evaluate that and provide a much better answer than I can provide.
Thank you.
Great point. Great point.
It's something that I'm super curious
Yeah,
about. So,
great point. Good. All right. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Reed, if I just make a suggestion, I would encourage you to email Mrs. Moody. She can speak at length about some of those, your third question, some of those items, and I know she has a wealth of information that she could provide for you. And we have the hidden security drills, so I'll turn it over to the student representative.
Thank you. On a lighter note,
Thanks, Becca, we needed that.
the Panthers have had an electric past couple weeks. If you've seen by the presentation, the boys basketball team became the South Jersey Division champions, with many Panthers sitting in the stands cheering them on the whole way. This show of Pitman pride was enlightening, and the students congratulate every basketball player and coach on the team. Last weekend, SpongeBob the Musical had its 4 productions to show the community what they've been working on for these last months. Congratulations to all cast, crew, directors, and volunteers involved for putting on such a great show. The high school is currently in the throes of Academic Spirit Week as students dress up every day and compete in events such as Quizzo and Academic Bowl. During this time, the Student Council also puts on a Teacher's Appreciation Luncheon, which you can see by the mysterious curtains and all hidden behind it, to celebrate the teachers that help us students significantly in the school. Thank you to Student Council for giving students and teachers a week of fun in these weeks before spring break. Thank you. That completes my report.
Who's going to win the Academic Bowl?
There's some competition.
There is? Oh, yeah? Who are the juniors worried about?
The seniors.
The seniors, okay. I was just curious.
If they show up.
They did?
That's a good
Oh,
point.
man. All right. No, not sweating the freshmen at all, are you?
No.
I'll be sure to really notice it. Thank you. All right, we don't have a data ad hoc committee report. That's going to bring us to finance and facilities, and I'm going to actually turn it over to Mrs. Bolton today.
All right, here we go with that. I will keep it short and sweet tonight, guys. Okay, the Finance and Facility Committee met on March 13th at 3:30 p.m. In attendance were Mr. Crispin, Mrs. Rose, Mrs. Miller, and myself. Some of the items we discussed were the update, little updates to the Panther Club handbook, submittal of the preschool budget, transportation and computer contract renewals, the 3rd year grant for our academies, and that was basically it, most of just agenda items. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve items 1 through 15 as written. Any questions? Good? All right. May I have a second?
Second Grossman.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Rose, please call the vote.
Biaiono.
Yes.
Bolton.
Yes.
Farrell.
Yes.
Papalardo.
Yes.
Pope.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Grossman.
Yes.
Items 1 through 15 pass.
Thank you.
Okay, so take us to curriculum instruction, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Farrell.
The Curriculum and Instruction Committee met on Wednesday, March 13th, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. In attendance were Mr. Crispin, Mrs. Moody, Mrs. Rose, Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Papalardo, and myself. We discussed the update in regards to choosing a new elementary math program. The selection has been narrowed down to 2 programs. We also discussed the Clayton Model application process, looking specifically at PES. This would assist in social emotional interventions and support services to our students. We also talked about the challenges of designing a schedule for the junior senior high for the upcoming school year, as well as discussed child study team services, in particular for our younger children at the preschool level. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve items 2 through 25 as written, and walk on the motion item number 26 to rescind the acceptance of the resignation of Mark Morris.
So we're going to do the,
Yes.
I apologize, we're going
Oh,
to do
we
the
have to
first
vote
25.
first, okay,
Yeah, so
sorry.
just a motion for,
Motion to approve items 2 through 25 as written.
okay, and may I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just want to make sure everybody understands, for number 19 for Sam Grossman, that attachment is a letter from the County Superintendent of Schools as per board policy, allowing Sam to be approved into that position.
And then if we could just have a discussion as a board about item, I want to make sure I got this right, item number 7. So that is our school calendar for the 24-25 school year. One of the items that we discussed is it currently has us coming back for a half day on the 23rd of December. And I think that sounds like a bummer, but our options aren't great either. So it's one of our built-in snow days. We had a couple different scenarios we discussed in terms of where we could see that additional day added back in. It was either reducing a day off of spring break, reducing the Friday prior to Memorial Day weekend, or an earlier in December additional day, which was December 15th. Does that sound right? No, that's not right.
Friday, May 23rd.
Okay, Friday, May 23rd.
That would be,
Wednesday,
that would probably be the
April
number 1
23rd.
option, yeah.
So I wanted to
It looks
discuss
like
that
it's
with the board.
Either the Friday of Memorial Day weekend or the Wednesday of the spring break.
Okay. So what are the board's thoughts?
Well, if we wind up using no snow days, does that Friday before Memorial Day return as a day off, or is that, if that's what we pick, it's gone?
No, we have to switch
Not that
days,
I
right?
care, but.
Right, yeah. We have to switch December 23rd with
Okay.
something.
Yeah, it just seems stupid to come back for a half day on a Monday when families travel for the holidays a lot.
I agree.
Can you make the Friday before Memorial a half day?
I think.
That would be the one, yep.
So it'd be a half day, not a full.
Right. Does anybody have anything else to add? So would we amend that item? Okay. So is that what we think is best? Is
Half
amending that?
day,
For the
the
Memorial Day.
23rd?
Yes,
May
May
23rd?
23rd.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say do the May date.
Okay. All right.
Spring break is short.
So let's amend that. Do we need, I apologize, do we need to do anything now that we've amended that motion?
No, just a roll.
Okay, great. And we already have a second, so Mrs. Rose, please call the vote.
Higby Iona.
Yes.
Bolton.
Yes.
Farrell. Yes. Papalardo.
Yes.
Coe.
Yes.
Grossman.
Yes, to all but 19, I must abstain.
Miller.
Yes.
Motions 2 through 25 pass.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Mrs. Farrell for.
All right, so now I'm going to walk on the motion. Item number 26, to rescind the acceptance of the resignation of Mark Morris as facilities manager.
May I have a second?
Second, Papalardo.
And any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Rose, please call the vote.
Higby Iona.
Yes.
Bolton.
Yes.
Farrell. Yes. Papalardo.
Yes.
Coe.
Yes.
Grossman.
Yes.
And Miller.
Yes.
All motions pass.
Thank you. It's going to bring us to Communication and Policy Committee. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Higby Iona.
Okay, the Communication and Policy Committee met on March 11th at 4:30 p.m. In attendance were board members Melissa Farrell, Natalie Pope, and myself, and Superintendent Steve Crispin. The committee discussed the recent Strauss-Esme policy alerts. The vast majority of the recommended and mandated policy revisions are merely revising the list of protected classes of persons listed within the policies. The list of protected classes is codified in the New Jersey Administrative Code, and it is not discretionary. The committee has also completed its review of the first group of board policies 0 to 177, which cover the board's bylaws, and is not presently recommending any revisions. We will be continuing the review next month with the next group of policies covering administration. With that, I move to approve item 1 as written, which is the first reading of the recommended and mandated policy revisions.
I have a second.
Second, Farrell.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Rose, please call the vote.
Higby Iona.
Yes.
Bolton.
Yes.
Farrell. Yes. Papalardo.
Yes.
Coe.
Yes.
Grossman.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Motion passes.
It's going to bring us to our second public comment. If you'd like to be recognized to speak, please come stand at the podium located on my right. State your name, municipality of residence, and group affiliation if applicable, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Okay. Seeing no one, it's going to take us to old business. Does anybody have anything for old business? Okay. New business, I would just like to wish Mrs. Rose well in her future endeavors. This will be her last evening enjoying a board meeting with us and all of our shenanigans and funny formula talk. Does anybody else have any items for new business? Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Papalardo. May I have a second?
Second, Pat.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next Board of Education meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, April 17th, Pitman Junior Senior High Media Center.